Well, right. Even Republicans have said of this White House, when it comes to spending, you're not making us stand out. Of course, the president goes back at them and says, well, you're not helping me stand out either. But apparently both sides are getting increasingly serious about eventually addressing this runaway spending, including the White House, which could release next week the first blueprint that it hopes within 15 years will balance the budget. 15 years is a long time, but it's a start. Independent Women's Forum's Patrice Onwuka. Patrice, there's so little we don't know, this much we do, that the president wants to get serious about this. But again, a 15-year time frame does allow a lot of wiggle room. What do you think?
Well, I think his heart is in the right place. Certainly, he wants to ensure that every tax dollar is being spent the right way. And so this idea of tackle a war on waste, I think, is a good idea. But the question is, is there political will to get it done on both sides of the aisle? And I will say, though, Neil, if there's a president to get it done, it's probably President Trump. I mean, he has a good track record when we look at deregulation in the administration, where his executive order of 2 regulations out for every new one, they've actually done 7 regulations out for every new one. So maybe this is a president to actually get it done.
Well, I hope you're right. I'm not speaking on the left or the right. It's just that others have talked about doing something on this, but it's just too tempting. If you're a Republican, you like building up defense, which is fine. And then you might zero in on entitlement programs or the rest, just the opposite of Democrats. The bottom line is, even though deficits themselves move up and down, the debt, which is an accumulation of all those annual deficits, just rises and rises to the point we're at north of 23 trillion, and it's unstoppable, Well,
and particularly if we are not touching entitlements. I mean, yes, I understand the GAO has identified at least maybe $140, $150 billion worth of spending that can be cut from improper payments. But let's talk about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid spending, which is astronomical and continuing to rise at 20 to 30% over the next decade or so.
But you know what happens there? As soon as someone even mentions trying to rein that in, you're a monster, you're a villain, you're taking Social Security checks away, Medicare coverage, you're right. So even slowing its growth, just slowing its growth becomes a Herculean task. And I can't blame politicians on both sides to say, oh, the hell with it, it's not worth it.
Well, that's why it's called the third rail.
You're right.
Nobody wants to get electrified and have their political careers ended because of it. I would love to see President Trump stand up and say, okay, we need to at least have a discussion about entitlements and how do we slow the growth. We've heard, unfortunately, Democrats putting out bills that would continue to expand Social Security and the amount of benefits that are given out.
Has not expressed any willingness in addressing these entitlements in the past. Is it your sense? Maybe if he's reelected, that's when he tries it, or that's when he tries to do something about it, or what?
Maybe. But I think that's why he's leading with the waste, fraud, and abuse angle of trying to tackle the smaller bite that might be more bipartisan.
That's like looking at change underneath couch cushions.
Yeah,
right?
it's quarters in the bucket, right, Neil? But maybe he will start to breach or at least brace that topic to the American public, because I do think Americans recognize when they look at their kids and their grandkids, we can't continue to push this down to the future and think, oh, well, don't touch my entitlements. There has to be some sort of give and take, and somebody has to be brave enough to make that case. Maybe in his second term towards his last year, maybe that's the time to start bringing it up.
Yeah, because the math doesn't lie. Whether you're on the red or blue side of this, it's a lot of green that's piling up here, which is forming the red. All right, thank you very, very much, Patrice. We'll see what happens.
Thank you.
All right.